Be careful on who you decide to meet up with on a dating app because you might just end up on a date with a narcissist. When I was in Denver, I ended up matching with a really hot 39-year-old who also happened to be a lawyer. He recently called off an engagement, so casually dating other people was kinda in the books for me. Before meeting him, I made sure I took all the usual precautions. We made it very, very clear what our boundaries were and said that there was no expectations. So like either of us could leave after a drink and it would be totally fine. Also, we made sure to FaceTime and he seemed super sweet, totally normal. However, the second we sat down, it seemed like he was on drugs. He would literally talk a million miles an hour about himself and wouldn't let me get a breath in. And the stuff he was bringing up was just odd. Like he even included that he broke off an engagement too. Hold on to that thought. 2 drinks in, this man leans over and says, I've been diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenic disorder, but I didn't want to talk about it over text. Because I don't know a whole lot about those mental disorders, I felt a little uncomfy. I also didn't feel like that was a first date topic. Then he literally starts joking about murdering me and states that he would use my dead body for Face ID to text my friend that I'm safe so the timing is off for the investigation. Like for part 2. Part 2 of going on a date with a narcissist. So I start getting uncomfy and getting ready to leave. He offers to call a car and I say, oh no, it's fine, you got my drink, I'm just gonna go. And he gets confused and he's like, wait, what's going on here? Are we not going home together? I expressed that I was just tired and I wanted to get back to my hotel so that I could sleep and get on the road in the morning. He could not have been more offended by this and kept trying to make sexual comments to get me to come back to his place. Like, no, that's creeping me out more. So I get into my Uber and I make it home alone. And he texts me, tell Elise I said happy birthday tomorrow. That is my mom's name and it was her birthday tomorrow, but I didn't tell him any of this information over drinks. That's when I realized he had found my Facebook and then he called me. He proceeded to go off and lecture me because he couldn't comprehend why I wouldn't sleep with someone as great as he is. He expressed how much better he is than my ex-fiance, who I never brought up over dinner. This is when he let me know that he did his research on me before even meeting me. And I realized that a lot of the conversations that we had over drinks was him just verifying that I was the same person he found on Facebook. He still contacts me and I don't know what to do or say. Follow for more. Part 2, a prank call might lead you to a shitty relationship. I literally stormed out of the club crying my eyes out. Straight up thought my boyfriend had severe brain damage. He told me this was a condition that he was gonna have to spend the rest of his life with, and I cried until the morning. Once it got to the next day though, I kind of noticed that he was talking normally, he wasn't in the hospital, so I got really sus about it. So I decided to go ahead and text his mom through my mom's phone, just to check in and see how he was doing from her perspective, and she was like, oh, he's fine, it was just a little scare. A little scare? Brain damage is a little scare? He was like, in fact, he's out biking right now. So I just stormed out to go dig some more information. I found out he messaged my best friend telling her not to tell any of his friends about his seizure. So I decided to confront him and called him fuming. And at first he denied everything. He was like, no, it's all true. So I told him I needed a break and that's when he was like, wait. I Googled some of the symptoms that I was having and that's what showed up. So you used Dr. Google. I just broke it off with him. If you guys have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Insta. This is why you should never hook up with a man. Just kidding, this is also karma on my end too. So I was starting my freshman year of college and I was going into it with a girlfriend of 3 years. I was no longer emotionally invested in the relationship, but I wanted to keep up appearances back home. However, I knew that when I went to college, I wanted to hook up with someone. And not just anyone, I wanted to hook up with a man. Because I had literally never done that before. So I went to freshman orientation and went to a meet and mingle and ended up meeting a guy named Logan. At least that's what we'll call him. He was so cute and so charming and we were able to bond over the nerdiest things, which is stuff that my girlfriend always made me feel extremely childish about. Logan made me feel validated and understood. This is when he told me he had a girlfriend too. Not long after, he ended up telling me he had a crush on me and wanted to talk about it in person. So I went up to his room and he sang to me, held me, and made me feel loved. Then I spent the night and, you know. The next day he took me out to lunch with his parents and then I decided to have a conversation with him about what we should do. We both agreed we should just keep acting like us and doing our thing. But I felt super bad and super uncomfy that he had a girlfriend. But one day my girlfriend found out and contacted his girlfriend. Storytime part 2 on why you should never sleep with a man. Again, just kidding, I am also to blame. Once my girlfriend found out I was cheating, she told Logan's girlfriend too. That night, she blew up Logan's phone telling him everything she had been told. And he literally told his girlfriend that I did sleep with someone on campus, but it wasn't him. He said that I just told my girlfriend it was him just to spite her. I obviously should have seen this as a massive red flag, as if there weren't a million others. Of course, his girlfriend wanted to hear my side, so I just went along with whatever Logan said. Even though I felt awful and I have no idea why I went along with something so low. And after that, we still kept sleeping together. And even though I had broken up with my girlfriend by now, he still acted like he was in a perfect relationship with his girlfriend. He also let me know that this was not his first time two-timing before. So his cycle was just continuing. He ended up breaking things off with me on their 1 year so he could spend time with her and completely ghosted me. Even after telling me that he still wanted to be close like we were before our affair. I know what I did was wrong, I'm not defending myself, but I still think it's shitty and they're still together. If you guys have a story that you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram. Make sure you always verify who randomly adds you on Snapchat, or you might accidentally send a nude to your substitute teacher. We're gonna call this guy James, because that's his real name. And I got a notification one day that James had added me on Snapchat. I guess he added me in the section where you can find suggested friends, but I immediately recognized his name. Even though I was a lot younger, he had went to my high school prior, and I had even watched him in a play. I was studying drama at the time, and it was just at a local theater. But it didn't take long after James added me for his Bitmoji to start popping up. So eventually I decided to answer his chats. And yes, this man was super attractive, but we really bonded over theater for a couple of days, and then he randomly asked me for nudes. I, not being okay with that, politely declined. And then I straight up got ghosted. And this cycle continued to happen about 3 or 4 times. He talked to me for a few days, bond, and then asked me for a nude or for me to come over to his house. I would decline and then get ghosted again. Weeks later, the cycle happened again, and this time I gave in. I sent him a half nude and he didn't screenshot it, so I thought we were in the clear. After that, he sent a video of himself, and then I didn't hear from him for weeks. That was until I walked into my drama class. Part 2 to accidentally sending my substitute teacher a nude. Like I said, it was radio silence from James for weeks. And like how I previously talked about my passion for drama, I was very involved in drama at school. Our group was due to have a performance in the next few weeks. But sadly, our teacher had fallen and broken her leg, so she wasn't going to be able to teach us for a bit. So they had to call in an emergency substitute. My friends and I were rehearsing one day when we were told that our new teacher was on his way. We were told to keep practicing and that he'd come up and introduce himself and help us with our performance. That's when he walked in, and if you can't guess yet, it was James. When he saw me, he went white as a ghost, and I felt sick. I mentioned to one of my friends what had happened, and she was like, "Girl, you have to say something." But I didn't really want that reputation, so I stayed quiet. He even mentioned to our class that he had a girlfriend and that her birthday was coming up soon. It felt so awkward, but eventually a new substitute took over, and I have no idea what happened to James. He tried to Snapchat me after this, but I ended up blocking him. I was also about 16 at the time, and he was about 22, and I don't know if he did this with other students. But James, we hope you see this. And if anyone has a story that they'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram. My family, who is extremely homophobic, ended up kicking me out and replacing me with my best friend. My family is absolutely awful when it comes to topics about the LGBTQ+ community. Literally any mention of it and they get extremely upset, which sounds like they're suppressing something to me, but I had a friend that we can call Katie, and my family absolutely adored her. Every Christmas they would buy her presents, she would spend family movie night with us, and they honestly treated her like she was the favorite daughter. So one day I made the decision to come out, and I decided to talk to Katie about it. She was literally so supportive and so respectful that I gained the confidence to talk to my family about it. Bad idea. Hell striked, and they immediately kicked me out of the house. So I found myself on a schedule of switching from couch to couch at different friends' houses. One particular night that was really hard for me, I decided to go visit them. I was missing them and also hopeful that they might accept me back in. And as I approached the house, my best friend was over there. She was playing games and doing family movie night with them, and so I decided to knock on the door. I burst into tears and went off on all of them. The absolute audacity. Later, my best friend texted me saying that she had a secret. Follow my Insta. Part 2 to my homophobic family kicking me out of the house and replacing me with my best friend. So I cannot believe the audacity of my family literally replacing me with Katie. Not only was she just over there for movie night, but they had actually moved her into my room, the room that I was raised in. I felt so much fury that I had to walk around the neighborhood for a while just to calm down. But eventually I just started to walk back to the house that I was staying at. Once I got in, Katie messaged me. She apologized for being such a bad friend, but then she said she had a secret. And she came out to me as bisexual and begged me not to tell my family. She felt like my family was her own and she didn't want to get kicked out. I was so frustrated that she was keeping the same secret that I had in my house, but she's getting to actually stay at my house. It has been a full year now and she is still with them to this day. But thankfully, I'm now living with my boyfriend and his family has accepted me as bisexual. I am honestly so much happier and better off. If you guys have a story that you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram. My roommate literally left me homeless while I was dying in the ICU. So I was studying over in Argentina to become a doctor. As part of the medical program, we had to see patients. This one girl that I was seeing had the chickenpox, which turned out to be an intra-hospital virus. So this chickenpox was way worse than the normal one, and I ended up contracting it. When I went to go get checked for it, they just gave me the normal treatment. Tylenol, rest, cream, but the illness got way worse. I started to get these awful headaches, and eventually I couldn't eat and I couldn't breathe. With the last of my energy, I managed to call 911 and opened up the front door to my apartment and completely fainted, and that's how the doctors found me. I woke up in the ICU as a biological risk patient, and the hospital literally had to get a hold of my parents, who were in Ecuador at the time, and tell them that their daughter was about to die and maybe had 24 hours. So they immediately got on a plane and came over. Since I was in the ICU and they had no idea how long I'd be alive for, I asked my parents if they could pick up some of my things, but my roommate would not pick up. That was when we got a call from her dad saying that all my stuff needed to be out of the house or they were throwing it on the street. Follow my Instagram. Storytime part 2 to my roommate leaving me homeless after she found out I was dying in the hospital. So instead of her being woman enough to pick up the phone herself, she had her parents call my parents. They literally said I needed to be out or else they were going to throw my stuff on the curb. My parents were in another country taking care of their daughter who was dying, and now they couldn't even be with her because they had to go to the house, pick up all my stuff, and put it in their Airbnb. And my roommate's parents literally started to threaten jail if they didn't. They went and grabbed all of my stuff. I slowly started to get better, which I really owe to my parents being there. I honestly feel like just seeing my mom helped. And I was finally coming to and realizing that I was in fact homeless. So I called her up and had her explain it to me. And her reasoning to kicking me out was that she just couldn't concentrate because she didn't want a dead person's belongings being in her house. It was disturbing her. They also refused to give us our deposit back or any of the months that we had prepaid. I had to give away literally everything I owned and try recovering in an Airbnb, which just made me get sick again. So I got an emergency flight back home and I had to drop out of med school with all the trauma the situation caused. My health never fully recovered, but I learned how to manage it. So put a finger down if half of your biological family is now behind bars for plotting your murder. So when I was 14, I made the realization that I was pansexual. I at the time did not know my own family's feelings about sexuality. So I decided to come out to them, but nothing could have prepared me for the extreme homophobic reaction that was in store. I just want to put a massive trigger warning over the rest of this story. After coming out to them, I literally remember nothing. I woke up completely foggy and out of it in a hospital. I was then let know by the doctors that I had a major head concussion and possible amnesia. Obviously, I was entirely confused and had no idea what happened. So that's when I was let know that all three of my parents, I have a stepdad as well, were in custody. They were being charged with abuse and assault. And then two of my aunts were also taken in for tampering with a crime scene. And literally the only reason that I was even found was because the neighbors heard me scream and called the cops. And now I was a ward of the state and had foster parents. Once the trial started, that's when all the crazy details about the crime came to light. Follow me on Insta for part 2. Storytime part 2 to my biological family plotting my murder. So this is where the trial began. Thankfully, my neighbors not only heard me, but they also watched some of the events occur through the back door. They watched my family remove a glass gun cabinet, which apparently my head went through. They assumed that I was going to die, so my aunts came over and started to scrub the entire place with bleach. And when asked why exactly this incident happened, my stepfather with no hesitation stated, because that no good for anything piece of ish thinks she has a choice over who she sleeps with. My aunts were sentenced 15 to 20 years and had to pay up to 10 grand in fines. Both my stepfather and my biological father got life in prison, and my mom got 60 to life for her assistance in the whole thing. She also didn't notify the authorities and failed to appear for her first trial. After the trial was over, I ended up getting adopted by two amazing men who live in Russia, which is my home country. They later adopted my siblings, and I'm now 24 with an amazing career and family. And even though I've changed my entire name, my biological family still tries to reach out. If you have a story time you'd like to share, DM me. So I can't really tell if it's romantic or not that my boyfriend put me up as the prize to a race without me knowing. To give some backstory, we were dating on and off for about a year and a half. And we'll just go ahead and call this man Brad. We met in health class and he was kind of an a-hole, but I honestly fell so hard for him. Well, around this time, he sold his old car and got a beautiful 2015 black Charger. And let me tell y'all, I would feel like such a baddie when he'd come pick me up. And when I moved an hour away, he would still come pick me up weekly and take me to nice hotels. Well, one day he was talking to me about how obsessed his friends are with me, which I thought was so strange, but he was like, yeah, I showed them your picture. They all think you are so fine. And I guess they all talked about how they wish they could have a chance with someone like me and blah, blah, blah. And that's when he decided to enter his fancy little car into a race. He asked me if I wanted to come see him perform, but we were in the dead of winter, so I was like, probably not. That's when he started begging me and told me that the prize was really important. So I decided to go. Follow my Insta. Storytime part 2 to my boyfriend putting me up as the prize for a race without me knowing. So when I showed up, I had a feeling that the prize was pretty important. So when I finally saw him, I was like, hey, so what exactly is the prize? And he gave me the weirdest look and he was like, babe, you know how all my friends think you're hot, right? I was like, I mean, sure. And he goes, well, I told them whoever wins gets to be your boyfriend. So I was like, WTF, Brad? Why would you do that? And he just looks at me and goes, don't worry, I'll win. And I was like, well, you better. So I literally stood out there in the cold watching a race that I could barely see. There was someone really tall in front of me. My heart almost dropped several times because I kept hearing Brad is gonna lose. And then I pushed the guy in front of me out of the way and saw Brad cross the finish line. One of his friends actually came up to us after the race and claimed that Brad cheated to win. He was probably just a sore loser, but we celebrated the rest of the night. If you guys have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Instagram. So in the summer of 2020, my baby daddy was working as a salesman. But obviously, there is a lot that can go wrong with this. So at the time, we were making bank and getting that bag. Literally, I kid you not, 5 grand every couple of days. So you can say we were doing pretty well for ourselves at that time. But one particular night that he had a sale, I had a really bad gut feeling. These people asked to meet him about a block away from our house. And this sales product was worth about $3,500. But he had already made about $1,700 this morning, so I was kind of concerned about this next sale. I was laying in my room about to tell him not to go when he just went ahead and left. And that's when I heard yelling from down the block. I was like, oh my God, and I looked out my window and there was 4 guys surrounding him with masks on. That's when I heard my baby daddy yell for me to bring the money. I immediately said okay and started to rush to grab everything. As I was running down the stairs with the money and approaching them, I noticed that one of the guys had a gun to the back of my baby daddy's head. Follow my Insta for part 2. Storytime part 2 about my baby daddy having a bad, sale. So as I start to go to them, they start to head up the stairs to me. And as we're approaching each other, I can see that one of the guys has a gun to the back of my baby daddy's head. Another guy has a knife to his throat, and the other one just looks like he was the muscle of the group. They were literally walking to come to our house. I made sure it was entirely pitch black within my place so that they couldn't see anything that was there. And I just brought them the money. I was like, take it, here it is. And he just stared at it. And then I said a little bit louder, take it. And he was just looking at it. And then I screamed, take it, it's here. And that's whenever he took the money and started to push my baby daddy up the stairs. I was pushed to the side as they looked around to see if they could take anything else. But they obviously couldn't see anything and just left. Neither of us slept for several days, thinking that they would probably come back. But thankfully, they never did. My baby daddy is still a salesman to this day. We're just more cautious, and I'm working on getting my education so I can get a steady job. If you have a story, DM me on Insta. You guys are not even going to believe it when I say that when I was 15, I almost became a stepmom. Yes, we did skip a few chapters, so let's start from the beginning of the book. Back in the day, in middle school, there was this new bad boy in town. And for the purpose of the story, his name will be Dean. So Dean was a little bit older, but he would date some of the middle school girls. A little sus, I know, but even beyond this man had a bad reputation. And I did my best to stay away from guys like him. That was until the second quarter of my sophomore year in high school happened. And while my mom and I were walking around Walmart looking for a pair of jeans, we ran into Dean's mom. Well, our mom started talking and bonded really well, and that's when his mom suggested that we would be a really cute couple. She talked about how much he's changed, so I went ahead and added him on Snap. And the insane thing is that we actually started having really good conversation, like deep existential ones. But one night I was bored and started to creep on his Instagram account, and I came across a gender reveal photo. This man had a whole son on the way, and I accidentally liked the photo, and that's when I got a text from Dean saying, go ahead, ask me. So part 2 to me almost becoming a stepmom at the age of 15. So when he asked me about liking the gender reveal photo, I just decided to go ahead and play it dumb and be like, what? And then he tried to act like that text was meant for someone else. And then I go, are you sure you didn't want to ask me about your kid? He was literally so embarrassed and thought that I would think of him differently. But he told me that him and that girl broke up, so I honestly didn't care. I was just like, so I could potentially be his stepmom. And he was like, yeah, I would actually love that. So we continue to snap and talk as normal and start to date. I caught feelings for Dean so hard. But one night when we were snapping, I got really excited and opened it up. And it was some girl. It said, who the F are you and why are you snapping my man? I was like, me and Dean have been talking. And she was like, I'm his baby mama and girlfriend. So I literally told her everything that this man had said to me and that he was in love with me. But then I blocked him on everything because I didn't want to break up their family. Ladies, if a baby mama is involved, always do that little extra bit of stalking to make sure they're really not together. Follow my Insta. The weirdest thing that ever happened to my family is my sister finding out she was dating our long-lost brother. You're probably asking, how did this happen? So when my sister was about 1, my mom was pregnant with another baby. She ended up birthing my brother, but me being 1 year old really didn't understand. Like, you really can't comprehend that you have a brother at that age. And fairly soon after this, my parents ended up getting a divorce. So my dad was originally from Germany and he decided to move back. Well, because you can't really do weekend visitations in Germany, my parents made the executive decision to split up the kids. My mom kept us and my dad got my brother. And we honestly didn't care. We didn't really know what was going on at that age. And after that, we didn't have any more contact. So fast forward 20 years later, my mom and my sister aren't really talking because of a whole separate situation. And she was going to our town's community college and met a boy. We can call him John. Well, John asked her out on a date and they ended up dating for 5 more years. Over the years, she learned stuff like his dad was from Germany, his dad passed away, and he didn't really have any contact with his mom.
This story time is why I stopped being friends with a girl because her dad was a pervert. And we're calling her Kim. So me and Kim became friends at school. Over time, we realized we lived close together. So she started coming over to my house and I started going over to hers. She had 5 brothers and she was the only girl. Whenever I'd come over to her house, I'd say hello to everyone, but her dad was always excited to see me. He'd immediately run and give me a hug. Over the past couple months, he'd give me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He said that I was his new little girl. I felt uncomfortable with it, but I went and told my friend Kim, and she said, he's just glad you're here, and you're like family now. I was like, okay, I guess, and I would just ignore it. Thanksgiving come up, and I went over to her house for a plate. Her dad opened up the door and gave me a hug and a kiss as usual. I walked in the house, and he said, you need to eat to keep that booty plump. I laughed in nervousness, and he slapped and squeezed my butt. There's more that happened after this. Let me know if you guys want a part 2. This is part 2 of why I stopped being friends with the girl because her dad was a pervert. So remember how I told y'all I came over for Thanksgiving? Her dad slapped and squeezed my butt. I was weirded out, but I laughed to hide how nervous and anxious I was. After I get a plate of food and I sit down with Kim, I told her dad slapped my butt. And she was like, yeah, okay, as if she didn't believe me. So again, I ignored the situation. As the day goes on, everyone is playing board games, laughing, and eating desserts. I had cheesecake, and I'm lactose intolerant, and you know how that went. I left the family for a few minutes, and I go to the bathroom. When I was all finished, I opened up the door, and there was Kim's dad, just sitting there smiling at me. I was like, oops, my bad. You were probably waiting for a while. Here you go. And I tried to move out of the way, but then he says, I don't need to go to the bathroom. He pushes me back in by the hips and locks the door. It gets really bad after this. Y'all let me know if I should make a part 3. This is part 3 of why I stopped being friends with the girl because her dad was a pervert. So after her dad pushes me back into the bathroom and locks the door, he's sitting there smiling at me, and I asked him very nervously if I did something wrong. He was like, yes, you haven't been spending time with daddy, and he likes to jiggle my breasts in a weird way. At this point, I was backing up because he starts acting weird. Then he starts unzipping his pants and gets closer to me. And guys, their bathroom wasn't that big. I immediately took the Windex that was on top of their toilet and sprayed it into his eyes and quickly ran out of the bathroom. After this, her dad starts yelling. While I'm coming downstairs, everyone asks what's going on. I told the whole family what Kim dad has done, and one of their little brothers yells at me, calling me a whore. I then went to Kim saying, you gotta believe me, that's what happened. She's like, my dad would never do anything like that. Her mom walks up to me and tells me that I should leave. I start crying, and then her mom yells at me and tells me to go home. So I left and went home crying. After that, I never went back over to her house. This story time how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. By the way, we're calling him Jake. So I met Jake at a college party, and I was able to go because my sister had just entered college, and I begged her to take me. So I had fun. I ended up meeting Jake, and from there, we started talking. He told me he was still in college, and of course, I told him I was still in high school. At the time, he told me he was 18, and he slightly looked older, but I guess he just looked older for his age. And I know we weren't supposed to date at these ages, but my dad was 5 years older than my mom, and I didn't think that it was that bad being 3 years apart. We were together for 10 months. When my birthday came around, he wanted to take me out on a date. He picked me up from home and drove me to a restaurant, and 5 minutes before we get to the restaurant, he gets pulled over for not having his lights on. The cops asked for his ID, he showed the cops, and he put it down. I took a look at his ID, and it said he was born in the 1980s. It gets really bad after this. Let me know if y'all want a part 2. This is part 2 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. So like I said earlier, he had got pulled over by the cops, and he asked for his ID. When he had got it back, he had put his ID in his cup holder. I took a glance, and I saw he was born in the 1980s. When the cops left, we drove off. Then I asked him, Jake, how old are you again? He's like, 18. Why'd you ask that? I picked up his ID and pushed it into his face. He quickly steps on the brake and snatches it from me. I was like, take me home. He said, no, it's a fake ID. I was like, what do you need a fake ID for? Where's your real one? He looked at me in shock. Then I told him I wanted to leave. I try to open up the car door to leave, and he tells me, you're not going nowhere. Guys, this is when it gets really scary. Y'all let me know if y'all want a part 3. This is part 3 of how I found out my boyfriend lied about his age. At the time, I was 15, and I found out he was 32. Okay, so like I said before, I saw his ID, and I could tell he was lying about how it was fake. So I immediately wanted to get out. I try to open up the door, but it doesn't open. I told him to let me out. He responds, you're not going anywhere, and you're not leaving me. I then start pushing on him to get me out. He stops and says, if you keep pushing on me, we're going to crash. So I grabbed my phone and I called the police. He took my phone and threw it out the window. And I'm like, where the hell are you taking me? Guys, this is when it gets really dangerous. Y'all let me know if I should make a part 4. Story time of the most dirtiest college roommate ever. By the way, we're calling her Jessie. So I moved in before Jessie, and I get settled and decorate. The next day, she comes and throws her bag on the bed, then leaves. I thought it was weird because she didn't even say anything to me. Couple hours later, she comes back, and I'm like, hello? And she's like, my bad, and comes gives me a hug. She smelled very bad. She starts unpacking all of her clothes and blankets, but they smelled like mildew. Anyways, a week later, there's this party going on for freshmen, and she goes, but I stay in because I had a migraine. I told her that when she comes back, can she keep the light off? Now it's 2 a.m., and she comes back in very loud, uses the bathroom, then goes to sleep. And now I'm up, so I got up to use the bathroom too. When I sit down on the toilet, I feel something very squishy. It was dark because, like I said, I had a migraine. I get up, turn the light on, and I was sitting in her shit. Story time of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man when I was 14, but most people from my country, it is called arranged marriage, and it happened to a lot of girls. My family was poor, but the guy I was marrying had a lot of money and promised to take care of me and my family. He also had a 6-year-old son, but he didn't like me. I had met him once before when my mother introduced him to us. She allowed me to stay with him alone. He was very touchy. He told me I was very beautiful and would spoil me because pretty girls like me deserve pretty things. After he left, I told my parents that I was scared to marry him and that I'll do more housework and I'll take care of my other little sisters. My father yelled at me and told me no. So the next week, I went throughout the whole wedding crying. My mom told me to stop because I was messing up my makeup. After we had got married, a couple months later, he grew very abusive. Part 2 will be up next. This is part 2 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. So we got married and a couple months into the relationship, he became abusive. Whenever my food tasted nasty or something wasn't clean right, he called me a lazy wife and told me I was no good and he should have married someone else. His 6-year-old son had no respect for me. The little boy scratched me, would yell at me, throw stuff at me, and my husband wouldn't do anything about it. I would tell him that I didn't like how his son was treating me, and he stood up and tells me to stay in my place and tells me I'm just a bad mother. I'd cried every night, wishing I could go back home to my mother and father. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I found out I was pregnant. He was so happy about it, and for once, he treated me so sweet. He would cook for me, clean, and told his son to be nice because his little brother was in there. When we found out the baby was a girl, he got mad and walked out on me. Part 3 will be up next. This is part 3 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. So my husband was excited that I was pregnant, but when he found out I was having a baby girl, he got very upset and walked out of the room. When we got home, he started treating me nasty again. He then started putting his hands on me. He was just very angry at me and never wanted to see his daughter. It took him 3 weeks before picking her up, but even then, he wanted nothing to do with her. As years went on, I became quiet and I wouldn't speak to him. I would just make sure our home was clean and the children were taken care of. He would just get upset with me that I wouldn't speak to him and accuse me of cheating. He claimed that I was sleeping with other men and that our daughter is probably not even his child. I never understood why because I was always home because he didn't allow me to go out. But I soon realized he only accused me of cheating because he was cheating the entire time. Part 4 is coming up soon. This is part 4 of how my parents forced me to marry a 40-year-old man and I was 14. My husband would always accuse me of cheating, but I found out he only accused me because he was cheating on me the entire time. Ended up finding out because his son told me. And like I said earlier, his son never liked me in the first place. So when I had made him upset, he randomly said that's why my dad has a new woman. I was off about it, so I went to ask my husband about it, and he admitted to it. He was very blunt about it, and he told me it was